Welcome. Brad, thank you so much for being with us and continuing this conversation with us. Just to say hi to the students here, you know who Brad Guhr is. You saw his presentation on Monday. Brad is the education coordinator at Dyck Arboretum of the Plains, which is in Heston, down the road. And Brad is here to answer some of your questions that you submitted for him after watching his video. So welcome, Brad.
Thank you. I'm happy to be with you again.
Awesome. So I've got a range of questions. I'll try to sort of keep them in sort of chunks of related segments, but we can also jump around some. First few questions I have are sort of expanding on some of the scientific elements that you talked about in your lecture on Monday. So first of all, we had a couple of folks who are really interested to hear just a little bit more about the oceans of Kansas. Is there anything you can expand on there? That's a really interesting topic.
It is a fascinating one, and to come to grips with that idea of not knowing that anything when I grew up, that 85 million years ago, this area was covered by a deep ocean that held all these sea creatures, was just totally fascinating. And you'd think, oh, that's just an old tale, but we have all this evidence existing in the fossil records. That if you go visit the Sternberg Museum at Fort Hays State University, you're going to find massive collections of all these plesiosaurs and mosasaurs and and large shells and shark's teeth and all these different cool things that paleontologists have made, like places like Fort Hays State University, a hub for research because their whole backyard of western Kansas there is just an amazing research area. And I know a number of people who have either done research there or have kids that have gone to do research there or whatever, that just think that's an amazing place. And I went out there with some friends. Just actually the last thing I did that wasn't socially distanced back in late February was going out to western Kansas with a bunch of good friends and visited places like Little Jerusalem, the new state park that is just opened up in western Kansas. And we went on a weekend, so we weren't able to gain access to the spires and all the chalk rock features and so forth. But I highly encourage anybody who's interested in this sort of thing and studying this kind of fossil history to just go out there and visit places like Little Jerusalem State Park or Castle Rock, some Monument Rock, some of these places where you can get out there and you can look for fossils and you can search for these things and so forth. And so that's sort of the extent of my limited knowledge of that place out there. But it does capture the imagination, and it is a fascinating part of our natural history in Kansas.
So that's a really interesting point. So you mentioned Little Jerusalem. A lot of these in western Kansas. We did have a couple folks ask for recommendations. Where should they go visit if they're interested in learning more about this natural history or about prairies, things within driving distance?
Yes, I actually just wrote a little blog post in, I think, maybe March about this. So if you Google my name, Brad Guhr, and Little Jerusalem, you're going to find a blog post where I talk about the locations you should go visit and staying at is it Lake Scott State Park is a really good close park to there, and where the location of where these places are and so forth. So check that out, and if you have any more questions, just send me an email at brad.guhr@heston.edu. I'd be happy to carry on the conversation.
Perfect, and I'll shoot that link out with some of these updates that I send the students too. That's great.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you. A couple more science-y questions. From a biologist perspective, how has the introduction of different crops and agriculture changed the ecosystem, especially the insect population of the Great Plains region?
Yes, that is a fascinating question, and one that I know that a number of people in Kansas are really studying very earnestly. The Land Institute up by Salina has been a research facility for more than 30 years that has, and it could be even more like 40. I'm trying to remember the exact amount of time they've been there. But Wes Jackson started this Land Institute with the idea of being able to look to agriculture to be more of a sustainable system of creating food that relates to better biological diversity, better care of our soils, better stewardship of water resources. And it's all by taking native prairie plants, the biology of these native prairie plants with their drought adaptability and deep roots, and being able to cultivate those kind of plants as more agricultural species, or doing crossing of these species with agricultural crop species. And so what they're getting is instead of the annual monoculture crop approach, like you'd say, let's use the example of annual wheat, like the turkey red wheat we talked about. The version that the Land Institute is working on is called Kernza, and it's a perennial wheatgrass that produces the same kind of, just about the same kind of grain material and carbohydrates and better mineral production and all of these kind of things, but it does it in a more sustainable way with a perennial rootstock. And so you don't have the fossil fuel inputs to replant it every year. It's more drought tolerant and those kind of things. And so what the Land Institute is doing to try to take traditional agricultural systems and more mirror what the prairie has taught us about more sustainable ecological systems has been a really fascinating thing that's happening in Kansas from a research perspective. And it's right here in our backyard near Salina. So I encourage anybody who's interested in that topic, let me know. I'd be happy to visit about it more. But the Land Institute in Salina is really cutting edge worldwide on this topic of more sustainable agriculture.
I had sort of a related question about root systems and Dust Bowl history and how our sort of farming practices maybe uprooted native plants and led to the Dust Bowl. Would you be able to speak to what impact the root systems currently have on natural disasters or the health of the land? They mentioned things like fires, tornadoes. What impact do the roots have?
Well, it was the 1930s that, the Dust Bowl that taught us a valuable lesson, that when we turn the soil and we remove the perennial vegetation that the prairie had preceded the locations of Western Kansas for thousands of years. When you remove that vegetation, you remove the root holding capacity of that soil with those perennial rootstocks, and you pair that with a drought period where the soil moisture has gone away and the wind is able to carry the soil great distances, you have this unfortunate experience of the Dust Bowl. And I think we learned some valuable lessons in that, trying to get vegetation more, holding the soil again. I mean, it kind of started this whole idea of planting hedgerows or windrows of trees to help slow the wind and loss of soil. But really, it comes down to getting vegetation back on the soil again. And we had another big drought period in the 50s, but we don't hear about the Dust Bowl result because I think they had probably better agricultural practices in place. And today we have a lot more no-till agriculture that deals with planting into existing organic material on the ground and trying to keep the soil as covered as possible to help us avoid that kind of a Dust Bowl situation again.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
A couple questions relating to the sort of vocation piece of your talk. One question would be, do you believe that everyone has just one vocation? Do you think that vocations can evolve into new vocations? How have you experienced that?
I would say the latter. I would say our vocations, I'm sure, would evolve throughout our lifetime. If we go back to that number of years that I used of 40 plus years that we might be spending time in our vocation or our vocations, if you just narrow it to one topic, I would think you get pretty bored of doing the same thing for that 40 plus years. No matter how riveting it seems at the time. There would be, you'd probably want to have new challenges and do new things. even if you take on the idea that, oh, the Malcolm Gladwell idea of 10,000 hours, that he talks about, of mastering a craft and doing that, that's only a small blip of your career, and you may want to go on and do some other things. And that's why I think, building in that diversity component that I talked about in the presentation helps make your vocation something that can easily evolve. It's not that you have to just pick up and do something completely different than what you were doing before. Perhaps it's something that you shift over time. Have a great example to pick up and use right now. But say for me, I was doing prairie restoration and ecological restoration activities for a lot of the first 10 years I was here. Doing bird and butterfly surveys and vegetation surveys and land management and things like that. And that sort of evolved into helping teach kids about K through 12 education over time, or developing a concert series, because I had an interest in live music and had gone to this Walnut Valley Festival for many years and had an interest in live musical arts. And all of a sudden I found myself managing a concert series. So it's kind of a weird, movement of vocational things for me. But I think it's a matter of following the things that interest you and excite you, and then trying to figure out how to just make a living doing that.
That's great. You mentioned the sort of children's program. We had a question about whether you need volunteers for the children's program and whether that might be an opportunity for Bethel students.
I would love to engage Bethel students in that program of Earth Partnership for Schools. And I've actually thought about that for a while, and kind of had conversations with Dr. Doug for some years about trying to figure out how we could engage education students in that process of helping, steward this process of engaging kids on the ecological restoration process of creating gardens on school grounds. And I think that it's fruitful for teachers or people that are interested in education on a number of different levels. And if somebody is at all interested in that, I would love to try to figure out a way to get them engaged in the process, because we have so many teachers and so many schools in the South Central Kansas region that are interested in doing these kind of things, and it's an ongoing process. And there are always ways we can figure out how to get more people engaged in that process.
That's great. A related question, and maybe you have an answer now, or maybe you would just suggest folks reach out to you. But do you have any suggestions for local internships or job opportunities for college students involving environmental studies?
Yes. Environmental studies is such a broad realm. I have a slide that I should pull up that shows, I wonder if I can I share my screen? I wonder if...
Yeah, absolutely. And I can always pause if you want to take a look for something.
Why don't you do that just for a moment?
All right, cool. I'll pause for a second. Okay, we are back and recording again, and Brad has some resources to share.
Okay, the question was regarding internship possibilities for people interested in environmental studies type careers. And I pulled up this slide from a presentation. I got this environmental studies degree from Bethel, and to be honest, it was a little bit bewildering graduating with an environmental studies degree from a liberal arts college, because it it was pretty general. The number of classes that I was able to study in the last couple of years of my time at Bethel just touched on a lot of different topics. And so I didn't feel like I was an expert in any one area, but that I had a broad interest in a lot of different areas. And so I show this slide as some of the environmental careers that somebody can be interested in and following up on if you are interested in the protection of the environment or education of the environment around you. And you can see how many different possibilities there are that this screen kind of talks about. I'll see if I can use my mouse to show it. Like I took the approach of being an ecologist. I did a little bit of kind of conservation officer work in some jobs when I was in graduate school. I went on to do more environmental consulting where I worked with, regulatory agencies and clients who were trying to do projects that have some kind of an impact on the land, whether they be power plants or water treatment facilities or power lines, pipelines, things like that. There needs to be a study to help make sure that project has as little environmental impact as possible. And so environmental consultant was a place that I spent some of that time as well. And just looking over some of the other areas, I guess right now, I get to deal with a little bit of ecotourism in promoting the prairies of Kansas. I get to work, I've been able to work with some farmers and horticulturists through this one at the bottom. Of course, environmental education, I get to work with teachers and do quite a bit in that area. So dabbling in a number of these different areas. And when I graduated from Bethel, I was also very interested in alternative energy and the kind of ideas that you can have there. So I just encourage an exploration of as many of these different areas as possible. Try to learn as much about them as you can now before you get too, bogged down or burrowed down into any one particular specialty. And then try to find people who are doing work in those fields, who have the expertise to help give you some guidance. And, if you can't find internships with these actual folks, look to do volunteerism if possible. You can put volunteer activities on your resume just as well as you can an internship or a brief job. And those things on your resume show experience, and they show that you're going after the things that you're really passionate about. And I highly encourage, if nothing else, for other than just to further your horizons and to help you learn a bit more about that field and to add something really cool to your resume, search those things out. And talk to me if you're interested. I can maybe help point you to somebody that I know in those areas, but just to keep talking to other people, and eventually you might connect with the right person that can help you make those connections.
Awesome, thank you, Brad.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can minimize.
I will unshare.
Cool.
Pause share. Did that do it?
I'm still seeing the shared screen.
Stop share, there it is, okay.
Perfect.
There we go.
Cool. Just a couple more quick questions. One question we had was, what are some ways that we as college students can dive deeper into the impact we have on nature, its culture, and what it means to be living in the plains? How can we make a change?
Repeat the question one more time.
I know it's a big question. What are some ways that we as college students can dive deeper into the impact we have on nature, its culture, and what it means to be living in the plains?
Become engaged. Learn more about these areas that you might particularly have an interest in. As you saw from that slide that I just showed about careers in environmental fields, there's so many different areas. And so if one of those is an interest to you and it relates to one particular area of our environment, it may be water, it may be soils, it may be plants, it may be wildlife. Let's just take an example of one of those. Let's say you want to be a wildlife biologist. Connect with some of the many bird watchers in the area. Kansas is a really rich environment for the birds that we attract. And I talked about that Great Plains Flyway, and there are so many expert birders that live right in the Newton area that would be happy to show you the ropes, take you out to areas, help teach you how to become a better birder and to learn about, the avian ecology around us. Or, if you're interested in learning more about the maintenance of prairie, give me your contact information, and I'd be happy to get you engaged on a prescribed burn. Places like Coffin Museum, John Piper's prairie reconstruction out there east of the mods and south of the softball diamond is another area that gets burned frequently. So there are many ways of, say, volunteering and becoming engaged in that sort of process. Those are just a couple of examples of, say, getting engaged with, botanical interests or the birds, but there may be other areas regarding water or air quality or soils or whatever, that you could just kind of get out and learn more about, and just take an interest in it. And the more you can kind of have experiences in those different media, the more you're going to be better equipped to ask questions or network with other people. So that sounds a bit like a convoluted answer to me, but that's the best I can do with that one. That's a big question.
That's a great answer.
That sounds like a topic that needs to be had for about a couple of hours further.
Well, I'll end on a lighter question then, Brad. We had a couple students who were curious to learn more about the turtles at the Arboretum. So a question was about what they should feed the turtles. They've been feeding the turtles bread. Is that ideal? Is there something else? Also, a student who was curious about the biggest turtle in the pond and how much bread the turtles eat every day. So is there any other information about the turtles at Dyck Arboretum that you can share?
I'm sure there are a lot more elementary school kids in the Heston area that could answer that question much better than I could. But I do know that, we have red-eared sliders, and we have soft-shell turtles, and we have snapping turtles, and especially of those last two species, we get some really large examples of those turtles out there. I think there was one that was called Fred for many years that was larger than a big serving tray, that would come up and just eat loads of stale bread that people that I always see carrying out there to the island to give to them. And since we don't allow fishing at the pond there, just for the reasons of not leaving lots of trash and string and lures and stuff all around the place, there are lots of perch and small fish and critters and things like that I'm sure also keep these turtles well fed. We have this sort of sanctuary around it. We're oftentimes seeing turtles come out and come up onto dry land and lay nests, and it's fun to see these things when they hatch. I see this migration of these little tiny baby turtles heading back down to the pond. So it is a really thriving turtle environment. And so I'm guessing, yes, they eat loads of bread. They also eat other more natural food sources in the pond there. And I think when people find turtles other places, I think those end up here as well. So yeah, we probably have one of the most thriving turtle populations in southern Kansas, I would guess.
And if that's not a perfect plug for visiting the Dyck Arboretum of the Plains, I don't know what is. So
that's right.
Go experience a thriving turtle population. Thank you so much, Brad. Thank you for talking to us. I'm going to wrap it up there, but I will share your contact information and that blog post that you mentioned with students as well, so they can get in touch with you if they have additional follow-up questions. But thank you so much.
I'd love to continue the conversation with anybody who's interested. So,
awesome. Thank you, Brad.